So, mission. And I'm not going to start with pricing, I'm going to start with mission. And I'm ripping a page out of the consulting playbook here. I think the agency's strategic mission should be on behalf of its clients, and it should read something like, our mission is to identify and quantify and realize the brand's full performance potential. It starts with the premise that any client that has a portfolio of brands is underperforming. P&G is underperforming, Nestle is underperforming, Unilever is underperforming, American Express, Ford Motor Company, General Motors, any of the banks, Australian banks, New Zealand banks, US banks, Brazilian banks. Everybody is underperforming their full potential because they have not focused on figuring out why they're underperforming and what they need to do about it. So, in order to be in a position to identify and quantify and realize, you have to negotiate a top-level strategic partnership that said, that's why we're going to be in business together. We're not in business together to develop a digital campaign for brand X. We are in business to get your brands growing again. We know how to do it. We know how to figure out where the growth potential is, and we know how to execute, but we have to work together. It takes time. And then there's a skills requirement, because you have to bring on board in your account department the kind of people that can do that business analysis. A young person coming out of university and going to one of the big consulting firms will be trained over 7 weeks in how to do this type of analysis. How to do a full performance potential analysis. What data do you need? What kind of slides do you use? It's been routinized. But I don't know of many account heads that ever mobilize their team to do that on behalf of their clients. They're kind of there hoping they can get the work out the door without losing the client. And it's a lot of what client service does is to maintain the relationship. So what's really needed are consulting-like business analytical skills at the front end. And then the ability to put together the type of program that will actually work. That's a scope of work expertise, where the agency takes responsibility for the scope of work because it has to be the one they want to do. Okay, that takes us to scope of work management, and given how painful the consulting experience has been for me over 25 years, it's still having to reconstruct scope of work. I like to see people, agencies that take this on seriously. So, the agency must design and negotiate the scope of work. Now, clients are going to do it too, but I think agencies have to be first out of the gate and say, look, we think in 2018, the scope that is likely to get our brands back on track is this one. This media mix, this number of deliverables, this number of originations, this number of adaptations, and if that is too pricey for the budget, we'll re-engineer it. We'll do fewer originations and more adaptations. We'll do something. We will do something so that the scope of work is affordable by you. It'll be the best scope of work you can get for your money. We will take responsibility for it. And then you negotiate it. But I don't know anybody that does this for the most part. Agencies must negotiate fees based on the scope of work workloads. Now, if you have a system of deliverables and scope metric units, it's not hard to do. One of my Mexican clients works with Mondelez, and they have been successful in getting Mondelez to pay by deliverable. How? It's a scope metric. Mondelez knows the scope metric value of every type of brief in the scope of work, and they use a price per SMU to pay them. Now in Mexico, the right price per SMU is about 500,000 pesos per SMU. And they're getting about 500,000 pesos for each of the different types. So all they have to negotiate, after having negotiated that, all they have to negotiate then is how many deliverables are they going to do and how many SMUs, and therefore what does that add up to? If it's too much money, we'll cut back. So it's totally doable. And the agency's in charge of getting out in front. Then there's the internal policy, which says, in the agency, every one of our clients, we will require each account head to document, track, and measure scopes of work in a uniform format using our own system. I don't know of anyone who does that, because there are some people that use Decideware, because the client, Nestle, uses Decideware. So the agencies that serve Nestle use Decideware in some form. And others have their own system, but I don't know of any uniform agency method for saying, we are going to keep the scope of work this way, because we need to know in a uniform way what Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, and Delta are doing, and who's being overpaid and who's being underpaid, and who's being stretched and who isn't being stretched. So every client in every agency office must have its SOWs documented and measured in a uniform way. CEO, agency CEO's eyes glaze over when I say, this is your policy, this is what you have to do. Aren't we doing that already? No. Well, that's up to each office, isn't it? I mean, a London office does it this way. They've got a system for doing it. I say, no, they don't. Anybody that tells you that they have a system and they know how much work is going on is not telling you the truth. And I understand why they are. But nobody in your whole global organization has the slightest idea, other than the client head, roughly what work is going on. Nobody is in a position to review it, look at it, measure it, comment on it, criticize it. Are we working on the right stuff for Nestle? Is it going to move the brands? Could anybody ask that question? If nobody knows the scope of work other than the person running Nestle, it's impossible. So in a way, agencies have delegated to the account heads the running of the agency without anybody looking over their shoulder to see what kind of decisions they're making. That's not good when you have aggressive clients cutting fees. So the agency must design and negotiate recommended scopes of work. Agencies must negotiate fees. Agencies must use a uniform format, and then I've got a system called Scope Metrics, which Darren uses for his clients. It's available. It's a scope metric system. It's off the shelf. It is simple. It's like an online Excel system that allows you to put in the deliverables, so it figures out this, the SMU thing. Our scope of work measurement system, which is the only one in the industry, I'm sad to say, is the only one for quantifying workloads for fee setting purposes. It works. And people that have used it have had success, but it's a really hard sell because agency leaders don't want to manage agencies. They want to develop new clients and let the account heads deal with the crap. All right, accountability. This is another big business management issue. Account heads need to be accountable for the decisions they make and the situations they've inherited. Now, just think through client Alpha through Juliet. And I think Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and Echo were all underpaid and overworked. And there are client heads that are running that every year. And every year they're agreeing to a scope of work, every year they're agreeing to a fee, and every year they're being given a limited number of resources to do it, and the work's killing them. Which of those client heads is under management's eye to say, you have got to fix that situation? We cannot accept $34,000 per SMU when we needed a minimum 139 or 150. Well, what are you going to do about it this year? Can you keep the fee and cut back the scope? Can you cut out the 20% that's crap, that isn't doing anything for the brands? Could you change the media mix? Could you get more money? Could we work on a different mission? That dialogue isn't going on. So account heads have to be held accountable, but they're not going to do it themselves. Being held accountable means being held accountable by somebody. Office heads don't feel like they are responsible for client heads. Office heads are responsible for hiring, and making numbers with a finance director. So agency top management must measure, review, and manage account head performance, just like at General Electric Corporation or any other big company where somebody who's given a business to run is held accountable for achieving certain objectives. Doesn't exist in the agency world because there's a kind of creative cop-out. Like, we're a creative operation, we don't work that way. One of the things that Kevin Roberts and I used to argue about is he told me his concept of leadership. He said, Farmer, you gotta realize, an ad agency is just like an anthill. Every ant knows its job and needs the freedom to do it. There's no king of the anthill. The queen of the anthill lays eggs. I'm sort of like the queen of the anthill. I go out and develop climates, but our ants need to know what they're doing. And the truth of the matter is that in the years that he and I worked together, Saatchi downsized by 30% because he could not come to grips with the need to manage workload. He let me do my thing there, but he didn't hold people accountable for the situation. Okay. And then there needs to be a system, because there needs to be a uniform system for measuring the work, measuring the price, measuring the productivity, measuring the profitability that allows a comparison across clients, just like you saw at the Icarus agency. Finally, account heads have to develop action plans to fix their bad situations. They may have inherited them. It may not be their fault that the fees are terrible, but it doesn't matter, they're stuck with it, they have to fix it. So, in summary, I think Plan B, if you accept what's wrong with Plan A, then Plan B has to be the following, that you have to reposition the agency to analyze and fix client brand problems. You have to create a culture of measurement and accountability rather than an anthill free-for-all. You need to implement something like a scope metric system to document, measure, and utilize the information. You need to track, measure, and negotiate remuneration based on workload, not on what the client's prepared to spend. You need to hold account heads accountable. You need to review and measure their performance. You need to fix underperforming clients. That's how you get control of price. Again, it all comes back to price. The repositioning, clients will pay for improved results, and they'll pay agencies if agencies can do it. So repositioning the agency on results is a way of fixing price. Measuring workloads and negotiating workloads is a way of fixing price. Holding account heads accountable is expanding the number of people who worry about these things and can do something about it. So it's expanding the management team. It's a way of getting control of price. Ultimately, I would think that the game of advertising is about developing premium pricing from clients that moves up towards the consulting level of a 5 times multiple because the work is effective. So the game of advertising, if you wanted to array agencies across the spectrum, who's really successful and who is not, and you had the data on price per SMU of their offices by client, and you could compare them, I will bet you that the agency that has the most premium pricing sustainably over a long period is the winning agency. And so it says, what we need to win in this industry are long-term relationships, the longest duration of clients, and the highest price per SMU that is sustainable. That's success. And those dimensions only exist on this slide. they don't exist in the head of anybody. So if you are in a position to think about a plan B, think what we're trying to achieve in the long term is the sustainability of our client relationships and the price premium from doing really great work that generates results. And if you do that, you will have successfully created a plan B that is not a Madison Avenue manslaughter, but is instead a Madison Avenue makeover. Thank you very much.